welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli, that's Bud Elliott, that's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson, coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 Tailgate, where our guy, Richard, Richard got a 9-thread message going about his Clemson Tigers. Well, good for you, Richard, because guess what? We will be talking about the Clemson Tigers as we get to our first stage of the ACC win totals. From here on out, I don't know why I overcomplicated this, guys. Like, thank you, Common Sense Bud, for being like, hey, why don't we do it alphabetically? Oh, that would be easier for everyone. Now that we don't have divisions, now that everything is just a massive 16, 17, 18 team conference, we're just going to go alphabetically. So we'll start at Boston College. We'll work our way at least through Louisville. So that means, Clemson, Florida State, you will get your time to shine today, as well as everybody else in that top half of the alphabet. But before we get into counting them up, we do have you hear that drip, that blip, 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 blip. Oh yeah, that's a leak, baby. Yeah, we got a leak of the draft of the notice of allegations for the Michigan football program as it pertains to the impermissible sign-stealing operation orchestrated by Connor Stallions. Now, we've always known there were going to be NCAA issues, and there were already Big Ten suspensions, and it can be a little dizzying to try and keep track of where we are with all this. But the NCAA had not made any kind of penalties, and the NCAA likely is not going to be, handing out time served for anything that happened at the end of the season, especially if, according to the draft, we've got level 1 violations that Jim Harbaugh, Chris Partridge, Denard Robinson, and Connor Stallions could all be facing. That we've got level 1 violations, one, of course, being the strictest for the school, because this falls under and on the heels of the same NCAA recruiting violations that led to a 3-game suspension for Jim Harbaugh at the beginning of the year, a 1-game suspension for Sharon Moore at the beginning of the year, which of course could become problematic as Sharon Moore, according to the draft of the notice of allegations reported on by ESPN and confirmed by Dennis Dodd, it includes violations under the repeat violator policy. So new head coach Sharon Moore, as a result of this Spygate operation, could be facing some significant penalties. Danny, you think Sharon Moore do you think the Michigan football season is going to be impacted by this NCAA case in 2024?
Possibly. I think we could see something similar to what unfolded last year, where Sharon Moore possibly has to sit out a game or two. Yeah, I think they could face something. There's got to be, I think they cheated. I wonder how much people care after the fact. That's kind of where I am, including myself. I don't think they needed to cheat. I think there was an edge. I don't think they needed to, as was evidenced by what happened when Connor Stallions was gone. Because I know a lot of people are putting out the win-loss record pre-Connor Stallions, post-Connor Stallions. Well, if you're going to go that way, go post Connor Stallions, and go list their record versus Ohio State, Bama, and Iowa in the championship game. I don't want to sound flippant about it, because I do think you should have to have consequences for cheating. But in sports, who's the greatest quarterback of all time?
Tom Brady. Holmes.
Tom Brady.
Hey. Like Tom Brady, does anybody ever say anything about Spygate or Deflategate anymore? No.
Well, not after they released that 10 episodes reputation washing documentary on Apple. That was all Bill Belichick's fault anyway. Tom Brady had nothing to do with it.
Yes, I hate that, but if you're not cheating, you ain't trying. It's kind of the American way in sports, unfortunately.
I have seen people be like, "Oh, well, the rest of the games are tainted as well because they had already pre-scouted all of those opponents." I'm like, yeah, but at that point, those opponents were on notice to change their signals.
Correct.
Right? Mm-hmm. So I don't really buy that logic. The most important takeaway I have on this is that in this, as reported by ESPN, the draft, which again, we don't know what will be in the final because it's just a draft. I don't know what draft number this is, but the fact that it's just level 2 for Sharon Moore probably tells me that whatever text messages were deleted and then recovered are actually not that spicy.
Mm-hmm.
Like otherwise, wouldn't that probably be a level 1 if they really had something there? So my read of this, based on just, I don't have the document, I'm just reading a report about a draft. So like, that's very
right. And this is
handy.
It's so silly. Why do we have this? I mean, I guess it's because there's so much interest because they're the reigning national champs. Like, I understand why there might be a demand for it, but the school gets sent a draft. Doesn't that seem like something that in a lot of other NCAA cases happens without it being the first headline on every major college football landing page?
I think so.
Chip, you did the drip, drip, drip noise for the league. I mean, I heard more of a creak as it's the NCAA just still trying to hang on to having any kind of power or semblance in this sport. And I mean, yeah, it's the same stuff as last year. I feel like we're going to relitigate it, and there probably will be further punishments, but there will be people who demand giant punishments that will not happen. There will be Michigan fans who demand nothing being, no punishments coming out. That will not happen. It will be a couple suspensions. All the people you listed who have level 1 violations are no longer with the program. So they'll get hit with heavy sanctions and it won't freaking matter because they're not there. And at the end of the day, Michigan will keep playing football and people will be mad, and that'll be the end of the story. And then if you're Michigan, like the way things are going right now, because the documentary is coming out with Stallions on Netflix. This is the NCAA trying to get out ahead of that. But I don't even know. It's pointless to me. It's all pointless. Like, yes, they broke rules. Yes, they should be punished for it. But at the end of the day, the advantage that they gained, kind of like Danny was saying, was not enough to really change the outcome of any of those games, because we saw they got to the college football playoff. They didn't have the advantage anymore. They beat Alabama. They beat Washington. They won the national title. They beat Ohio State. They beat Penn State by running the ball like 85 times, pretty much telling Penn State, hey, we're going to run that same dive play that we've been running for the last quarter and a half. Try to stop it. And they couldn't. Like, yeah. Okay, cool. We'll move on. It's fine.
But I'm glad that you mentioned, because it does seem that, especially in the social media circulation of the story, Sharon Moore deletes text messages equals guilty. When you read the report, they got the text messages.
Right.
And he supplied, like he said, okay, you hand it over. They've got the like recovery or the imaging that they can do. So whatever these 52 text messages were that were deleted have been recovered by the NCAA. They have been reviewed. And so I do not think that this NCAA case will impact Michigan in a significant way for the 2024 season. When you go through the whole NCAA process, when you go through all the appeals that you could do, I have a hard time looking at this as anything other than potentially something that at the administration level, they end up having to negotiate, right? If the school itself is facing a level 1 violation, get the lawyers ready and we'll go out there and we'll figure out some kind of settlement with the Keystone cops that
or
are
just stall, because the NCAA is going to be dead soon anyway. Like, just roll it out until the NCAA goes away. You guys break free, form your own thing, and then just everybody moves on with their lives.
Is beating Alabama and then a then 14-0 Washington team, is that one of the most impressive 1-2 playoff runs in terms of opponent?
Thinking off the top of my head, I would say
if Georgia had beaten Alabama in 17 after winning the Rose Bowl against Oklahoma in that insane game, I could have thrown that up there. But just
I'm trying to think back to
2014 Ohio State.
Yeah,
I mean, like you upset Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, which is
a Mariota
home game for Alabama. And then you smoked an Oregon team that smoked an undefeated Florida State team.
That's a good one. It's very similar to what we're talking about.
I'm also thinking too, like the Clemson Alabama years. Who were they playing in the semis those seasons?
Clemson in
Michigan
one of them.
State, and like some of those random.
Yeah.
Washington.
Ohio State. There was a semifinal win against Ohio State for the Tigers in there as well. along the way. I mean, LSU worked Oklahoma before they went and beat Clemson as well in 2019.
The one year Bama played Clemson in the semis, it was like a Clemson team that had who was
Kelly
the quarterback who was like decidedly like a guy that just didn't belong in a playoff game, you know. So
hey, listen, I wrote a great column about him after he won the ACC championship. You know, is what Dabo called him, the heart of a champion. This should be your Heisman right here. I mean,
he was the quarterback for a team that won the ACC championship.
Like you can say some really flowery things at the podium in Charlotte. You know, it's a great place for positivity when you host up that ACC championship trophy. All right, a little bit more from over the weekend. From the recruiting trail, that we had a huge announcement. We were happy to bring it to you on CBS Sports HQ. It was Faizon Brandon, the number 1 player in the 2026 class. And Andrew in the tailgate came in, lots were open, and he actually said, interested if Bud has a scout on Faizon Brandon. Also, Scott Lloyd. Any thoughts on Tennessee getting the number 1 recruit? Scott, Andrew, thank you so much for jumping in, buddy. We got it on the rundown for you. So, Bud, what should we know about the number 1 player in the 2026 class?
This is why I go on the road and see these guys in person, right? I've actually seen Brandon twice in the last 7 weeks. So you're looking at a kid that is a little bit younger than grade level, and yet he looks physically just as physically developed as a lot of the guys who are a full, class ahead of him. And in some cases, 18 months older than him. He has a very nice arm for the age, 6'3"-ish, just under 200 pounds, but, looks like he's probably 205, 210. I think a guy who will continue to grow. I got to see him at FSU's elite underclassmen camp, where he threw next to Dia Bell and a couple of the other top 26s. I thought he was, the best prospect there. And by a not insignificant margin. And then I got to see him at Future 50 as well. And I thought he was generally the best quarterback at that underclassmen event down there at IMG Academy. So, this is a guy that I've been kind of diamond hands on going to Tennessee. I know there was some Alabama smoke for a little bit, but I was always my sources feel really good about him going to Tennessee. And then the fact they got him, I think just a couple years after they got Nico, it's an awesome sign for Tennessee's program. Because if you could land these number 1 type quarterbacks, I know people will point to the transfer rate and the bust rate. Guys, in the modern era, they hit a lot more than they bust. Let's be clear about that. So, Danny, you saw that. That's a guy who's in that tape 15 years old. He could easily be 6'5", 220, very mobile, has one of the best arms out there when we're kind of putting these kids side by side at these events, and fun kid to talk to. So doesn't act like an asshole. Sorry for saying asshole, but anyway, I like the kid, and number 1 overall player in the country is a great get for Tennessee.
Don't worry, we're not on TV today, so it's all good.
Tomorrow,
hey, we will be.
Yeah, tomorrow. What time are we on?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
CBS Sports Network.
He's so I watched some workout video of him. Probably one of the. I think it was from Orlando, Bud. You might have been there, and he is pretty impressive looking. But he's got a frame where he's kind of chiseled and looks like he can fill out really impressively. Liked his release, his mechanics. So yeah, I think he's going to be a really good signing.
Plus, he gets to spend a year learning under the greatest quarterback in the country, Nico. So he'll be fine. This is true.
How many 5-stars are going to be in that room at one time? Potentially 3.
Well, there'll be
2.
It's getting kind of Ohio State-ish in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Tennessee and Ohio State, pretty much the same program right now.
Yeah, that's what that's what the many people are saying.
They are saying.
Print the graphic. Put that out there.
Coming up on Thursday, we are going to have our first edition of Camp Buzz. But when we have the significant news, we're going to bring it to you. And this coming out of Gainesville, as Florida running back Montrell Johnson is reportedly week to week after undergoing arthroscopic knee surgery. He was apparently injured in the opening days of training camp, according to the Associated Press. It is considered minor, and the report from the AP says he is expected back in time for the season opener against Miami on August 31st. Now, this would be significant because Florida, as you might remember, lost Trevor Etienne to Georgia from the transfer portal. And you also have Cam Carroll dealing with a knee injury. So you still have junior college transfer Jacoby Jackson, sophomore Trayshawn Webb. that's what we're looking at in terms of these training camp reps. But do you think that Montreal Johnson will be back for the opener? This is one of those situations where you are always really good about monitoring the injury status in terms of making sure to get us ready when it's time to do those locks. Should we take more note than the reports are suggesting about Johnson's injury?
I haven't asked anybody at Florida, but I did speed run a couple podcasts this morning, and like the Gator pods I listened to this morning were not particularly enthusiastic about the likelihood of him being back for that game. Like, that's not me reporting that he won't be back. That's just, I'm kind of presenting what other folks have said. The market doesn't seem to care, right? Miami is a 2.5-point favorite in Gainesville. This line has not moved. Running backs don't particularly matter to a point spread, I'll say, and especially not a back. Like, I think Montreal Johnson's a nice college player, right? But if you're a stud running back, you don't play 4 years in college football. You go pro in almost all instances, unless you have like remember when Corum got hurt at the end of the year and it was going to be some like, how healthy could he really be type thing. So, I mean, like if it was like an Ollie Gordon or something like that, maybe, I guess he did come back. I really, you need to be like a stud junior who just should be in the NFL, but by rule cannot, I think, for it to really impact a point spread.
You need to be the guy that like is getting mocked in the first round.
Yes.
Even though NFL teams have absolutely no desire to draft running backs in the first round. You got to be like a Bijan.
And Johnson's like a 6th or 7th round guy.
Yeah.
I think, maybe 5th.
Yeah. So no,
I think that the speed will, unless he's a lot faster than what he looks on the field, like the 40 time will knock him pretty hard.
I do think if you're Florida, though, you need as many able bodies as you can get.
Yeah.
So it's a blow to him, but I don't know if it's like it's going to be a huge deal if he's not there for that first game, but you'd love to have him.
If Florida wins, it's because they can pass on Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Miami's run defense was pretty good last year. It should take a step up this year. The secondary, I think, is the major question about that team. And so we'll see how their communication is early on in the swamp.
Yeah. The reasons to like Florida probably were not based entirely on Montreal Johnson. I mean,
what are the reasons to like Florida, Chip?
Graham Mertz.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I think Graham Mertz had a good season last year.
He had a really good season under the radar.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is where, like, when I'm looking at Billy Napier and somebody says, like, paint for me the scenario where Florida exceeds expectations and Billy really turns this thing around, I think it has to be Graham Mertz, if not replicating, building on what was his best full season of college football that we've seen. So that would be a great opportunity to step up and do it.
I think the other reason is that Florida is probably better this year at every position with the exception of running back, because you lost Etienne to Georgia, and defensive end because you lost Princely to Ole Miss. Probably a little bit better at D tackle. I would say overall. Linebacker, they very much expect to be better. I think defensive coordinator, they could be better this year, to be frank, because they brought in some help for Austin Armstrong, maybe run a little bit simpler stuff for college kids, a few fewer busted coverages maybe.
Yeah, they missed Dexter in the inside of that defensive line last year.
Receiver may not be better, by the way. The one kid that lost the 49ers is pretty good.
Pearsall?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely a significant one. All right. Enough of that. We got to turn our attention to the All Coast Conference. All right. We're talking East Coast. We're talking West Coast. It's the ACC, baby. And
South Coast too.
Listen, Gulf Coast too.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go.
Conference of Olympic champions, baby.
That's right.
Katie Ledecky, ACC legend. Coming up on the other side, we begin the ACC win totals for 2024. We start with Bill O'Brien and Chestnut Hill and work our way through the group. Next.
Have you heard of semaglutides? Ozempic, Mounjaro?
Hartman, this could be dangerous. Let's do it.
South Park, The End of Obesity. New exclusive event, now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, Tom Fornelli, you live your life with way too much ACC. So I got to ask you, are you ready to count them up?
Oh, I was born ready to count up ACC win totals.
As much as I think it's the under is a safe play, like I can't even.
Count them up! Count them up! How many kids are going to win this fall?
I can't fathom 8 wins.
How many kids are going to win this fall?
I just can't. I don't see it. It's not on there.
It's
not the schedule I'm looking at. Unless there's another schedule somewhere.
And we begin with the Boston College Eagles. Now, we mentioned when Jeff Hafley left the job to go be an assistant in the NFL that perhaps the schedule was one thing he was looking at. In the 2023 season, you might remember the non-conference schedule included like a Holy Cross. It included a UConn. It included an Army. I don't know if it had a power conference non-conference game. The 2024 schedule, however, includes, Missouri on the road. It includes a Michigan State. It also includes, road trips to Florida State, road trips to Virginia Tech, going to play SMU. And that's why if you go over to FanDuel Sportsbook where you can make every moment more, you'll find Boston College win total at 4.5. Now, Bill O'Brien, Thomas Castellanos, if you go talk to Boston College fans, listen, they're out there. They host podcasts too. It is all about what Bill O'Brien can do for Thomas Castellanos. In the spring game, in the spring practice, a lot of the commentary was that maybe, they were trying to work to make sure he doesn't just take off running. But he was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. It's one of his best skills. Danny, where are we starting with the Eagles in a very difficult schedule?
This was, especially for one to start off with, one that I was struggling because I went through and I was like 3 wins, I think. And then you got to get 2 more on top of that. They do have a lot of returning production.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things like how good is the production that's returning? But I'm going to go over simply for the fact of Thomas Castellanos, who I think is a guy that we saw had Florida State on the ropes. I mean, it was probably Florida State's closest call in the regular season was when they went to Boston College. I think he's going to get better. I think Bill O'Brien will find a way to utilize him. I think we forget sometimes how good of a coach Bill O'Brien is, whether it was success in the NFL, whether it was success his first stop at Penn State, or even at Bama, where the standard is, well, you better be number 1 or 2 in the country in almost every offensive statistic, or it's going to be a failure. So I'm going to go over. It's not my favorite. There's a lot of belief in one player. If he gets hurt, this could absolutely blow up in the face. But I'm going to go over for BC.
I am also on the over.
Let's go.
I mean, I don't think you look at this schedule. I don't think getting to 5 wins is that difficult of a task. Clearly, they'll win that Florida State game by 30. So you only need 4 more wins after that. But you get Duquesne at home. That they should win that.
Wait, bud, are you not paying attention? Did you not hear that?
But like Michigan State, that is a tough non-conference game. It's not what you're not really trying to schedule Big Ten teams in non-con.
Right.
But Michigan State coming to Chestnut Hill, that is not a game I look at and say Boston College has no prayer of winning that game. They can win that game. Western Kentucky, they can win. Louisville at home on homecoming. Syracuse at home, they can win. North Carolina at home, they could win. Pitt at home, they could win. And you might even be able to sneak a road win at SMU or Tech or Virginia. Like, I don't think you're winning the FSU game. I don't think you're winning that Mizzou game. But everything else on this schedule says to me they might not win them all, but they're going to have a shot to win them all. And kind of like what Danny was saying, one of the reasons I think they're going to be in these games is at quarterback. Like, I don't think Thomas Castellanos is a superb, amazing, elite player, but I think he's a good enough college quarterback that he can help you win games. And we've seen him do it in the last couple of years. And they have a ton of experience coming back on the offensive side of the ball besides Castellanos. The offensive line is pretty much back in almost its entirety. They have a couple new guys at the receiver spot, but I think the continuity on that side of the ball, combined with Bill O'Brien's kind of play calling, gives this team at least a respectable floor of scoring points every week, which I think in the ACC and in this schedule, that could carry you quite a bit. So I'm not sitting here saying like BC's going 7-5, but I think they can get to 5-7.
Over. And I wasted about 30 minutes this morning trying to figure out why the hell I'm over on this Boston College. I don't really like it that much. So there are a couple reasons. One, this is the best in market price to bet over. So some other folks out there have 5, and they don't have 5 at a number that would represent the proper exchange in juice. So if you want to bet over, FanDuel is actually the place to do it. Number 2, I was still like, do I really show an edge here? And it's very, very slight. I've actively bet under on 5 of the 6 teams they play. So I really just don't like some of these teams on this Boston College schedule. I am scared to death that Bill O'Brien is going to try to make Thomas Castellanos into a passer. Okay.
Correct.
I saw him in high school. I'm like, this guy would be an awesome running back. Okay. I know that Florida State and Georgia wanted him to play running back, not quarterback. He went to UCF. It's like, that makes sense. Gus is going to have a running quarterback. It's like a spread option type thing. Then he went to Boston College, where they ran a lot of the stuff that they tried to do. Now this Bill O'Brien thing scares me a lot. The fact they still keep mentioning Grayson James in practice reports, that scares me a lot too, because I saw him play at FIU. I'm like, cool. He's a traditional drop back passer. Is BC going to try to implement the Bill O'Brien system in year 1, as opposed to just trying to get to a bowl game? Because I don't know if the personnel really fits what Bill O'Brien wants to do. Or maybe I'll be wrong, and he can turn Thomas Castellanos into a good passer that good coaches didn't think they could do, and certainly other coaches, when they had him, couldn't do. I'm a little bit concerned about the guard position here, ultimately, but I think their tackles are pretty solid. I think the receiving core is a good improvement for them, and I think the defense will be better, actually. So I guess give me over.
Under.
Wow, the BC hater, Chip Patterson.
Right.
Yep. It was, they were dancing on like a razor's edge last year. Let's see, beat Holy Cross by 3, beat UVA by 3, beat Army by 3, beat UConn by 7, beat Syracuse.
Chip, the win totals ain't counting point margin. They're just counting dubs.
I know. As I look at it, I think that even Michigan State might be a challenge. I think that, the Syracuse and the Pitt games, I think they'll get Pitt. I think they'll get at Virginia. But the problem when you're playing Virginia and Pitt is they're also looking at BC as like, okay, this is going to be the game where we've got to go get it. I mean, if you're going to do that, pro style drop back passer stuff, what happens if your defense gives up a couple quick touchdowns to Western Kentucky? I see Duquesne and Western Kentucky. I'll give you those wins. But I think it's going to be tough to be able to pull together the rest of it. I've got Florida State, Missouri, Virginia Tech, Louisville, SMU, and North Carolina as surefire losses. That gets you to 6.
You have UNC at the end of the year as a surefire loss for BC?
Yes. I think
Homer.
North Carolina is a markedly better team.
Homer. What if I told you the Michigan State game's the red bandana game, Chip?
Bam! Wells Crowder game. I just did that too. That put me over.
Yeah, I'm sure y'all had that on your sheet too with the prep. Shout out to the tailgate. Hey, listen, I might take BC in that weekend locks, but on the season as a whole, I think it's going to be more of a 4-8 kind of season. I think it's a tough year 1 for a team that got to 6-6 by the narrowest of margins against an easier schedule. So I'm on the under there. How many games are going to win this fall? Year 1 of ACC play for Justin Wilcox and the Cal Golden Bears. We got a couple quarterbacks. I think they're, still got that competition going. We've got some transfer portal additions. Mikey Matthews is definitely one that stands out to me, coming over from Utah. And you've got one of the best daggum running backs in the entire country with Jade Knott. Now at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more, they've got the win total set at 6.5. Tom, what are we doing with the Bears?
This one was not easy for me. I was going through it. I mean, this is a very close call. This is not something that I will be betting myself, but I'm taking the under, even if only slightly. I think that getting into a new conference and, kind of having to learn a whole bunch of new teams is what put it under the top, I guess would be the best way to put it. They'll beat UC Davis to start the year, but you get Auburn on the road in non-con. You have San Diego State, who is going to be a tough team. It usually typically is. I know they had a rough season last year, but with Sean Lewis taking over that's a tough team to prep and get ready for. You've also got Oregon State and non-con, which they should win because it's not going to be the same Oregon State team you saw last year. But in conference, you're starting off at Florida State, then you get a bye, then you get Miami. So like you're facing 2 of the best teams in the league to start your ACC life. Then you're hitting the road for Pitt, NC State, again, another one of the top ACC teams, bam, on your schedule. So it's like the thing really eases up in the back half of the year when you get Wake Forest, Syracuse, Stanford, and SMU to finish it off. But like, I don't know what kind of condition this team's going to be in. I think Jaden Ott is great. I think he's going to have a good season, but I'm not overly sold on any of their quarterbacks. Defensively, I don't know that I'd say they have stars, but Justin Wilcox teams tend to be pretty, solid on that side of the ball. So I'm not really worried about that. But this is a 6-6 team to me more than it's a 7-5 team. So I'm taking the under.
Same.
Under?
Yeah, I'm on under. Same reason. I think their defense can be really good. Wilcox always comes as a defensive-minded guy. I think they're going to try to play great defense, run the football with Ott, and try to limit the exposure of the quarterbacks who are okay. Similar to where I was kind of on the teeter-totter with Boston College and went over because of Castellanos. This one I'm going under because the uncertainty. Like Fernando Mendoza showed a little bit of flashes, but the fact that they're not completely sold on him makes me a little bit worried, and that they are talking about Chandler Rogers as well. Plus the schedule, I think, didn't do them any favors. I mean, they play three of the best teams in the ACC. If you have NC State in that category, which I do think they are, and I know they get them at home, but is it really a home field advantage? And then that road game against SMU isn't doing them any favors. It's one of the stronger newcomers as well. So I'm on the under as well. More confidently, probably, I think, than Tom.
Yeah, I'm not going to be betting the under personally, but I'm sure as hell not going to bet the over when FanDuel has the worst in-market price to bet the over and the best to bet the under. So when in doubt, I kind of like, should I bet the worst market price or the best market price? So I'm going to bet the best market price and go under here. I actually think the defense has a chance to be a good bit improved. They had some defensive line injuries that were pretty meaningful last year. I kind of liked what I saw out of Mendoza, assuming some of the transfer offensive linemen they took can step up a little bit and be better. I could see this team being over, but man, this is a lot of travel, a lot, like to Auburn, to Florida State, to Pittsburgh, to Wake, to SMU. That's not particularly easy. And I mean, I like him in a lot of these games, but that is a bunch of travel. And they also lost a decent bit at receiver. So we'll see if Callaway can really make a difference there.
Oh my God. Standing against the firing squad once again. I'm going over. Let's go. It is the slightest. It is the slightest of overs. I've kind of got them, my dumb little number has them at 7. So, okay. So I think they're a 7-5 team looking at this schedule. The way that I've got breaking it down, you're going to lose to Auburn. You're going to lose to Florida State. You're going to lose to Miami. You're going to lose to SMU. There is a little bit of the voodoo of you're looking at Cal's schedule and you're saying, okay, so which team is going to go to Berkeley and get got? And I do think that I didn't say it was a definite win for Cal or a loss for the Wolfpack, but I do think that in the course of the schedule, that's the one that could get a little bit spooky. Now, they had Jake Spavital as their offensive coordinator last year. They lost him to Baylor. Now they promoted from within with, is it Bloche? Anybody?
Bloosh.
I don't have the pronunciation on it, but I do know where he came from. Where was he before Cal? North Texas. So Chandler Rogers, who arrives from North Texas, reunites with somebody who was on that coaching staff. I feel like combined with the transfer portal additions of Mikey Matthews, as I mentioned earlier, from Utah, and then look, where's Michael at? Listen, we've been looking at Tobias Merriweather when he was at Notre Dame, like he was going to be a difference maker for a long time. I still believe he is fundamentally a good player, and in the context of this offense can help provide a good passing attack that is a complement to having a running game with Jaden Ott. So as I understand that they're going to have a lot of crazy, travel, I think they've got 5 or 6 wins that can get them a nice baseline, and I'm going to give them a couple of the toss-ups remaining on the schedule. So I've got them around 7-5. I've got them over 6.5. Any pushback as I once again go 1 on 3?
No, nothing contrarian Patterson over here.
I mean, they have to handle the travel, and we really haven't seen. Have we seen a college team have this type of travel? I really don't think we have.
Well, thankfully UCLA is paying for it.
Count them out. Moving on. Oh yeah, let's go. The Clemson Tigers at FanDuel Sportsbook. You can get them at 8.5 as the win total. heavy juice on the over right here. Danny, do you, and not like a Deion Sanders, do you believe, but do you believe that Cade Klubnik, Garrett Riley, another year together, do you think that there should be a belief that that's going to lead to improved play?
Yes. Unequivocally, yes.
Okay.
I think he'll take a big step forward in the offense. I also think the fact that some young receivers we're going to step up to. Bryant Wesco, we know about him. Having an absolute weapon on the outside, I think could be a difference for him. I think Maffa's a pretty good running back too, for him to be able to lean on as well. But I think overall, the knowledge of the system, like having another year in a new system, I think will make him comfortable. I know there was a lot to be made last year of, some of the decisions which we ripped him for, and deservedly so, when he went off and did his own thing at Miami. I think a lot of that could be a direct result of unfamiliarity, newness in a system, and thinking he'd do one thing or just making the wrong decision, which appeared he did a lot. I think this defense is going to be really good. I think they're a 10-2 team all day long. So I have them pretty convincingly over the 8.5, which makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm bullish on Clemson.
I'm under here very slightly. I definitely don't want to pay minus 172 to go over here. I think Clemson could have the best offensive line they've had in several years. I think their receiving core is the most improved receiving core in the ACC. I don't know if I buy into Cade, to be honest. Like, I really just have never seen much out of him that I liked. So I think it's illogical to assume that a second year under Garrett Riley would lead to worse results. But I don't know that I'm going to buy a massive jump from him. But I mean, granted, I could be wrong, just simply because the receivers and offensive line are probably a good bit better. They did rely on Shipley an awful lot, and he's gone. I think Moffa's a stud, but in a different way. So maybe they just relied on Shipley catching the ball so much because the receivers all got hurt. That's probably, But I'm a little concerned about the defensive depth here. And this is where I think, the transfer portal refusal to use, I mean, you are relying on a lot of young guys here. And even acknowledging Clemson's very high hit rate in the transfer portal. I don't know that all of these young guys will be ready to play if a couple of them are pressed into action. So I'm going to go under very slightly here, but it's not something I'm betting. I think this is a good market number.
I'm over. I feel pretty damn good about it. I'm very much on the record my skepticism about Cade Klubnik. I am not a big Klubnik guy, but I look at Garrett Riley and the success he had at TCU with Max Duggan, and I just say, Cade, you just got to be Max Duggan. And I think Cade can be Max Duggan. I do agree with you, but I think their offensive line is probably in shape to be better than it has been for a while. And I do think they have some decent depth there as well to kind of withstand any possible injuries. I think the receiver situation is better. I think Phil Maffa is better than Shipley. And I think part of the reason the offense struggled last year was they were a little too dependent on Shipley. I was never a huge Shipley guy. They're different players, but I think I would rather lean on Maffa. And I think if you look at the run game last year, they were much better running the ball with Maffa than they were with Shipley. Defensively, I do have the same concerns with you. There are a lot of freshmen in that too deep, and that could be a problem with injuries. But I just kind of still give Clemson the benefit of the doubt on that side of the ball. They're typically very good. They've got very good players. Barrett Carter is an absolute stud. They've got a nice rotation on the defensive line. Wade Woodaz is a good player with an incredible name. And I just think that overall, this is a team that is going to be like, we're just asking Clemson to win 9 games here. And I know the juice on this is extremely high, so I don't know if I'm actually betting it, but Clemson winning 9 games feels like Clemson wakes up and wins 9 games every single season. So I'm very comfortably on the over here.
Yeah, that's because 12 years in a row, they won 10 or more.
Mm-hmm.
For 12 years, they had 10 or more wins. And only last year, 9 after the Kentucky victory in the bowl game, only last year did it have a collapse down to 9 wins. Danny, I'm with you. 10.0. This is a 10-2 football team. I've got them losing to Georgia, and then at Florida State, at Virginia Tech, I think they split those two. They finished the year 12-2, 7-1 in conference play, depending on the tiebreakers, maybe getting back to Charlotte to try to defend their title. Peter Woods is going to have a very big season, I believe. I think that you've also got your classic Clemson guys. Like, there was Dexter Long. Yeah, DeMonte Capehart. Like, that is your Austin Bryant. right? Or, like these guys that are playing alongside the 4-stars and the 5-stars that have developed over the course of their career. DeMonte Capehart is a senior who I think is going to have a tremendous year. Last year, they threw TJ Parker into the fire as a true freshman. He played really well. They threw Khalil Barnes into the fire as a true freshman. He passed the test. Avion Terrell as well. RJ Mickens. And this year, I think it's going to be the freshman linebacker, Sammy Brown, who everybody at Clemson cannot stop raving about. This, to me, is the best defense in the ACC. And then it becomes a question about the offense. And this is where, if I am to drink the Kool-Aid, it starts with Matt Luke is an improvement in offensive line coaching that will help the entire offense function at a higher level. If I am to believe that, then I think that we don't even need Cade Klubnik to take a huge step forward. And maybe it's that higher, not necessarily the Garrett Riley hire. Maybe it's that kind of hire and reworking the way that they're coaching that side of the ball that ends up being Dabo's big offseason win heading into this year. So yeah, it's 8.5 minus 172 at FanDuel Sportsbook right now. Maybe that ends up drifting up to a 9. I would like an over on a 9 as well, because I think this is a 10-2 season for the Tigers. You think? Good?
I just, the margin between over and under here is like 3 points, right? So if you're betting under or just having to pick them all for a show, and you think they're like 6 or 7 point favorites at Vatek, then you're probably taking under, right? If you think they're more like 9.5, 10, at Vatek, and then maybe 12 as opposed to 9-ish hosting Louisville, then you're taking it over. I mean, it really is like a 3 point difference there. It also depends pretty heavily on what's your opinion of South Carolina, and are you giving them a straight up 0 for the Georgia game? I'm not. I give them some chance to win that game, but very small, like less than 25%. But I mean, they are playing a lot of games that if you just do win, loss, it is easy to write down the dub. They're clearly favored. They're favored in many cases by more than a touchdown, but not by more than would put them in that completely safe range, I guess.
Danny, did you have something?
I was going to say exactly 10 wins. Can you get that? I was looking. Yeah, here it is on FanDuel. Plus 310. Exactly 10. Let's go, Chip. Me and you.
Let's go.
We're going together.
We ride.
Then they'll get 11. They'll screw us.
Yeah, they beat Georgia, and we collapse. Coming up on the other side, what are we doing with year 1 of Manny Diaz at Duke? Florida State back on a revenge tour. Georgia Tech facing another brutal schedule. And can Louisville do it again as the schedule gets tougher? We'll get into all that and more next.
Never before seen matches and new rivalries unlocked.
Trust me, we're just getting started.
The Summer Cup is here. Let these games begin.
How many games y'all gonna win this fall? Is what Nina King sat down in his office and said, Manny, what's it gonna be? How many games you gonna win? Now, there are definitely games as we take a look at the FanDuel Sportsbook over under win total of 5.5. There are some games on that Duke schedule where, yeah, you can pencil them up. Like Elon, I was thinking about it. Elon, UConn, Middle Tennessee, even though it's in Murfreesboro, but like Elon, UConn, Middle Tennessee, Northwestern, if you're a year 1 coach at a place, thank you. Like this is what we need, especially with the way the schedule unfolds, where you get these games early in the year, kind of figure things out. ACC schedule comes up later. Now, there are some monsters on that ACC schedule, including, Danny, didn't you say 7? I think you can draw a line at the top 7 teams in the ACC. Florida State, SMU, Miami, NC State, Virginia Tech, all 5 of those 7 teams, in my opinion, all on that schedule. So, Danny, I'll let you get first crack at it as you see they're unveiling the new Bull City logo for the football team. They've got the new shout out to our friends Joe Ovis, Joe Giglio. They said that, can you say this 10 times fast? They've got a new tailgating atmosphere in the stadium called the Devil's Deck.
Nice.
DECK. Can you say that 10 times fast without getting flagged by YouTube? So, Danny, what are we doing with the Blue Devils?
They also added, there's a girl that covered the NBA. She's a social media NBA. She's like NBA 2K. I saw her make an announcement like she's going to be the official like hype girl for Duke. I don't think she has any ties to Duke. Like they're pulling out all the stops. Manny Diaz, I like him. I think he's been a really good coach along the way. You can make an argument he had more success at Miami than Mario through his tenure early. We'll see if Mario can change that narrative. But of the places he's had success, and he's been able to run all these defensive schemes that he's liked to run, and I think all the way back to Texas, where he kind of burst on the scene, to Miami, to Penn State, you can do a lot of that stuff when you have elite talent, of which he was working with. You not only lost a quarterback who really made Duke a difference maker, but you also lost some defensive players. RJ Oben was somebody that transferred to Notre Dame. I think he's a stud along the defensive side of the ball. I know Malik Murphy comes in. I wonder how he is too. After we saw him in a spring game, controlled atmosphere, he looked awesome at Texas, but then he had his opportunity on a team that was really good and put up good offensive numbers and came up short, and really kind of his star fell after those couple games that he filled in. I think it's going to get tougher on him when he's going to get, what knocked out of him, because he's not going to have all day to throw. All that being said, in case you didn't know, I'm on the under.
Under as well. This is my most heavily bet win total of the season, and by a good bit. Like 6.5, I thought was stealing. 6, I thought was pretty stealing. 5.5, even juice. I thought was also still a decent edge. 172?
Yeah,
75. I think it should be like -2, -190-ish. So under for me. Now, getting aside from the boring like market stuff, I love the Manny Diaz hire. I don't know if this team has the depth to go fast like they are going to intend to do. So I think there is real potential for a late season fade here. In fact, I have them as more than a touchdown underdog in their final 7 games. And I think that sets up really poorly if you are depleting your depth. They also run into the problem when you lose all these offensive linemen, and it's a really tight offensive line transfer market, and you're Duke, so it's hard to get in kids academically. Like look at the schools where they took these guys from. Northwestern backup, Stanford backup, Holy Cross, Lafayette, Penn, and Cornell. Like, are those the best guys they could get, or are they the best guys they could get in to school? And then they took UCLA's left tackle, who, 4.6% blown block rate is one of the highest in the country among full-time starters. So I have major offensive line questions for Duke. I'm not going to go over what Tom already said on defense. They also were top 10 in net punting and punting success rate last year. The punter's gone. I think they're worse at basically every single position, and meaningfully so, and are the worst team in the ACC, and maybe by like as much as a field goal. So I'm going under.
Under, yeah. We spent a lot of time last year talking up Malik Murphy, and now he's at Duke, and he's a mobile quarterback, and he's going to have to be playing behind that offensive line. He's going to be moving around a lot to keep things going. I think defensively, kind of to echo what you guys have already said, like Mike Elko had a ton of success with this defense at Duke, because Mike Elko's scheme is not entirely dependent on having like really great players. Whereas Manny Diaz, I feel like as a defensive coordinator, is a very good defensive coordinator, but I feel like his style and philosophy works a lot better when you have great players, because he is very aggressive. And I don't know if he's got the kind of talent on that side of the ball this year to where he's going to really be able to do the kind of stuff that he wants to and likes to do. So I think that I think Manny Diaz is a good hire for Duke long term. I just don't know if it's going to be very good this year. So I'm also on the other.
It's going to take him a while to get his personnel, Yeah.
But Jonathan Brewer's the offensive coordinator hire. Everything on the book on him says they want to play fast, but you identifying that is something that I think is very important to take note of, particularly given the offensive line depth. Also, the dumb overreaction. They did still bring Grayson Loftus to media days.
Oh, also, they only played 6 home games.
Mm-hmm.
That's not easy.
Oh, because they're at Northwestern and at Middle Tennessee. Come on, man. People want to be in the Devil's deck.
Yeah, and look, they'll beat Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee State is horrendous, but still.
Is it better to be in the Devil's deck or have the depth? Never mind.
Never mind. It's supposed to be, hey, shout out to my people over in Durham. It is supposed to be a tailgating atmosphere where there's like yard games and all you can eat, not all you can drink alcohol, but at least like all you can drink and eat for like sodas and snacks. So yeah, I mean, it seems like a great way to make it an event there for the people in Durham. But yeah, I'm on the under 2 for all the reasons that y'all said.
As much as I think that
Whoop, wrong button. How many games y'all gonna win this fall? Whew. I mean, how many games do you need to win? Over under win total for the Florida State Seminoles is at 9.5. And we're looking at, of course, a season that's going to start overseas in Dublin. That's how we've gotten a lot of good morning from Mike Norvell as he sprints to training camp every single morning earlier than any other coach because they're going to start in week 0. I don't see a lot of certified losses on this. So 9.5 feels appropriate, but there are some games that could be a little tricky. There are some games that could be a toss-up. Tom, you get first crack at this. Seminoles over under 9.5. What do we think?
It makes sense that of the 3 options available to you, you'd go to me first for Florida State.
I just thought that you should set. I thought that you're
Do
a tone
it.
setter.
Do it.
12-0.
Keep Peyton. Let's go.
Lock it up. Over of the year. Florida State's not losing a game. They're the greatest team in the world. If they fail to win the national title, it's a huge disappointment of a season. There is no excuse for this program not to win the national title. There, now that I've raised the expectations, just hopefully the Seminoles fans have stopped listening now. They think I love them because I'm going slightly under, not betting it, but slightly under. I've got them at 9.3 wins, and it's at 9.5. I just overall, like defensively, I think between Patrick Payton and Marvin Jones, you have a very good argument for having not just the best set of defensive ends in the ACC, but one of the best sets in the country. The pass rush is going to be good. That's awesome. Offensively, I like a lot of what they have. I think the offensive line is going to be very solid. I think I don't think the receivers are as good as last year because they had 2 very good receivers, but I still think they're decent. And I think Roydell Williams is a good running back, and I think they've got depth there. My biggest concern with this team is the quarterback. And I think like DJU, we know what he is. He's solid. He is steady. But you've got big games on this schedule. Like you've got Clemson, you're at Miami, you're at Notre Dame, and Florida is Florida, but it's still a huge game in that state and in this rivalry. DJU to me is somebody that in those big moments, he's not a difference maker to me. And I think that Florida State overall is going to win plenty of games because they're just going to be a better team than most of the guys they're facing. But when you get in those tight ones, I don't have a ton of faith in DJU. So I think 9-3 is just a little more likely than 10-2.
Yeah, I don't see a big edge here. I'm going to go over because this is the best price in market to go over, right? Everywhere else to go over, you're laying like $1.10, and here you're getting $1.04. So, I mean, to me, a 14-cent difference when the margins are razor thin is pretty meaningful. I echo Tom. I actually think the receivers are a bigger step down than Tom does. I think that is the biggest weakness on the team, and probably I am much more worried about receiver than I am quarterback for this team. I do like that DJU is used to throwing to really small guys at Oregon State, and that like has been something I think you'll see with FSU as well this year. Linebackers a clear step down. Maybe you lost Bethune and Deloach for like 2 24-year-old dudes. They were usually in the right spots, even if they weren't athletic freaks. I think that they are going to be in the conversation for the best corner combo in the country. I understand why Izzy Thomas was not on first team All-ACC because he hasn't played a full season yet, but for Norvell to go on McElroy's podcast and be like, yeah, he's our best player, essentially. Like that's some pretty high praise when you have guys who are, right now projected like second rounder type stuff. So, and Cypress is kind of back to the form now that he showed at UVA when they got him, when he was first team All-ACC.
So that's what I was about to ask you about because I'm not that high in Cypress.
Yeah, he's been playing really well in practice. I mean, granted, the receivers are materially worse this year in practice, but obviously they do like him quite a bit. I think the defense is going to be pretty damn good against most of the teams they play. And this, to me, should be the best offensive line FSU has had in a decade. They have 7 guys who are 23 years of age or older as their top 7. And a couple of the blue chips they've signed are kind of progressing. So very, very slightly over. I think 9 and 10 wins are like by far the most likely outcomes. And yeah, not a big edge for me.
They are a veteran ass team on offense.
Yeah.
Like maybe not a ton of experience, but a lot of old dudes.
And DJ showed up in shape. Like I will say that. Like if you saw the Circle K commercial like he's not 260. He's probably like, 245-ish. And I think that's important because they will run him.
DJ showed up too with the right mentality. Everything you've heard about him has been awesome. We had Norvell say that he's been remarkable, which I think I warned everybody. It doesn't matter what he does in practice because clearly the length of time Dabo stuck with him, and I'm sure had him competing in practice. He looked good at practice in Clemson too. I agree with Tom that he hasn't been that difference maker to this point. The thing is, I think there are 3 games where you have to worry about that. Clemson at home, Notre Dame on the road, Miami at the road. But I think the other ones you have to feel pretty comfortable. Like last year we mentioned earlier, we're doing BC. That game kind of got them. I don't think BC does that again. Like where's the game where they could potentially slip up? SMU,
Could be Ireland.
It could be Ireland. I am definitely nervous about Ireland. So here's what I think early in the season. I think they're going to be able to rely on defense in the run game. I think one of the credits too or the lack of credit that Mike Norvell, like he's an incredible play caller and he's been great with his quarterbacks around building plays specifically for game planning. I remember it was the first year when was it he beat North Carolina? North Carolina was a top 15 team. I forget that one.
21.
Yeah. But he came out and that was a game plan where it was like, oh, he schemed up some stuff. He is a really good schematic play caller to find your deficiencies, but also to play to his quarterback strength. I don't think they're going to ask DJ to do a whole lot through the air. I think he's going to be handing the ball a lot. I think the defense is going to be great. And I do think they'll be able to find the difference. I think 10-2 is probably where I'm likely, but I feel like if I'm going to go 9-3 or 10-2, I feel like the more likely situation is the 10-2. So I'm going to go over.
If we're going to take DJU at what he's been, he is a 60% passer that throws 2.3 touchdowns for every 1 interception. That you're going to get some plays where he's able to go out there and with his talent, with his physical gifts, he's going to be able to make some plays. I feel like Jordan Travis is going to be missed. Yeah. I feel like Jordan Travis did some things outside of the plan when things went wrong. His ability to make a play is not something that I am counting on DJ Uiagalelei to do. I like Darius Washington. I like Josh Farmer. I like the idea that there are older players that have been at Florida State. We make such a big deal about, Mike Norvell as a portal guy, but this is not the final, but this is one of the first years where we've got guys who have been brought up in the program and they're old and they are motivated. And I think that they're going to have a big impact on this season. In terms of the win total, I've got this as a 10-2 football team, 0 certified losses. I will give you Georgia Tech, Boston College, Memphis, Cal, at Duke, North Carolina, Charleston Southern, and I'll give you Florida, especially at the end of the year. At SMU, maybe they get tripped up. Clemson at home. I'm very high on Clemson. Miami, is what it is, and you still have to go to South Bend. But those are the only ones where I'm not just putting in an automatic W. So I've at 9.5. I kind of like right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. You've even got plus money here, so I like going over the 9.5 for the Seminoles here because I think 10-2 is where we're going to land. 11-1, absolutely in the mix. So. Even, given that context of DJU, I still like the bones of this roster and consider Mike Norvell a plus value coach, as made evidenced by the fact that we've got him as one of the top 10 coaches in the country in our CBS Sports coach rankings. So give me the over here for the Seminoles.
Count them out.
So I had to I might have mentioned this before on the show, but I had to do the pick every single game for CBSSports.com earlier this summer. I had 5 teams at 7-1 at the end of the year. 5 teams at 7-1
in conference
play.
I mean,
that's how disparate these conferences are. And you know what happens is that when you run the tiebreakers, according to the ACC league office, strength of conference schedule ends up bouncing everybody but Florida State and Clemson. Because Florida State and Clemson play 2 of the 4 toughest schedules in the ACC, and that's going to end up being what I think helps them, should that happen, end up winning some of those tiebreakers to make it on into the conference title game.
I mean, there are 7 teams that have greater than a 5% chance to win the league, according to like Vegas right now. I mean, SMU 5%, Vatech 8%, NC State 10%, Louisville 11, Miami 17, Clemson 19, Florida State 21. Like that is tight. And
when we were
your
saying
favorite to win the league is barely even money to make it to the title game. Like Florida State minus 120 to make it.
Like you draw a line after that 7, and the odds reflect it as well. That it's like then we do a big drop down to sort of what I would believe is the middle tier. But all those end up checking out. All right, 2 more before we get out of here. I know we're running a little heavy. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets over under win total of 4.5. Tom, what are we doing with the Bees? They made it to a bowl last year. 4.5. You bring back your quarterback. You bring back your top running back. 3 of your top 4 receivers. What? Why?
I'm always a little wary of like the Power 4 teams that are, you'd say they're mid-tier to slightly below mid-tier in their leagues. And then there's a lot of hype around them coming off of a successful season into the next season. But yeah, I was surprised to see the win total as low as it was for the Yellow Jackets. I am on the over. It is not like run to the window and bet it, but I do think this is a team that if you look around the league, Haynes King last year was not outstanding, but he was better than I thought he was going to be. Like he was a pretty good Jag plushes type of QB. I think he's going to have another kind of solid season for them. I think defensively they looked good. I don't go up and down this roster and say that guy's a stud, but I do think that they were well coached. And I think more than anything, the schedule provides plenty of opportunities to win games. Like Florida State and Ireland, I think they have a better chance there than they would in a vacuum simply because it's the first game of the year. It's in Ireland. There's a whole lot of weird things going on there, even though I think Florida State wins that game. But Georgia State, that's a win. At Syracuse is winnable. VMI, very winnable. At Louisville, I don't think that's impossible. Duke at home, it's like this is a team that I feel like could start off the season really well, and then it gets to the back half of the schedule where it's Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Miami, NC State, and Georgia, where things kind of crater a bit. But I also think they can win one of those games. They beat Miami last year, right? They could do it again. It's at Bobby Dodd this year. They could beat NC State at home. They could go on the road and beat Virginia Tech. So 4.5. I just need this team to get 5 wins. I think they can do that. I'm on the over.
I'm on the over as well. First of all, this is best price in market to go over. And I like Georgia Tech's offense an awful lot. I think Buster Faulkner is, is he the best offensive coordinator in the ACC? Based on what he did last year, I think you have to, consider him certainly in that conversation. I'm a little bit skeptical about their ability to
stop
to play defenses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But exactly 5 wins comes up in my sim 30% of the time. So being able to capture that 5 on the good side of the over here is really pretty meaningful for this wager. So I think they can kind of run back the same team they had last year and get to 5-7.
Haynes King led the ACC in touchdowns. Anybody know what else he led the ACC in?
Turnovers.
Yeah, interceptions.
Yeah. You dropped this, King.
Defense. Oh, buddy, big question. All right, so we're going to give you Georgia State. We're going to give you VMI. It might get tough. I mean, this is a brutal schedule. Florida State, Louisville, Notre Dame, NC State, Georgia. I think those are losses. All right, so Duke, that gets you to 3. I mean, I know that Georgia Tech is always, ruining Mac Brown's season. That would get you to 4. I need an upset. I am under. I like Georgia Tech, the team, in a vacuum. And if Georgia Tech played Syracuse's schedule, Georgia Tech would be going to a bowl game. But Georgia Tech is playing Georgia Tech's schedule. And I think that that's going to make it very, very tough to make it back to the postseason without an upset. I don't love it, but I'm on the under right here.
I will say I understand the skepticism about the defense, but I do think if Haynes King does a better job of taking care of the football, it will go a long way to helping that defense look a little
Hell better. Yeah, it would.
There are a lot of teams that I think are being projected towards the top of their potential range to get to this number. Like Vatech is projected as if they take a big step to get to this number, I think.
Oh,
right?
and this is where we
Miami,
come into like buds on
Miami
the
is-
under for a lot of teams that are on this schedule.
Well, no, I'm not actually, but I'm just saying, like, Miami seems to be projected like very towards the top of their range here. If you look at like some of the look ahead stuff, what's Georgia Tech hosting Miami going to be? Like Miami 11 to get to this number? I'm just trying to kind of reverse engineer this win total versus what I think some of these projected spreads would be. Like, are we confident Miami double digits on the road at Tech? I'm not particularly. Maybe, but I don't know. I mean, Georgia State to me is pretty terrible. At Syracuse, that's a lot of new pieces for Cuse, man. Like that's kind of a pivotal game here. We're thinking Louisville's a lot better than they were last year. At least I am. But maybe NC State doesn't click. Like there's a lot of teams on here that I think are being talked about positively to get this win total this low. And I don't know that all of them will reach their potential.
It is the under that I dislike the most, where I ran through it and I was like, I don't know about this one. It doesn't quite sit right, but this is, if the math ain't mathin', I just got to stand by the way that I see it here on August 5th.
Danny is also on the over himself. So
you would granted, we don't endorse specific books elsewhere, but like you'd much rather wager under 5 minus 110 than under 4.5 plus 115.
Correct.
Yes.
Like that's especially with the frequency with which 5 comes up as the specific outcome.
Right.
For this team, in my opinion.
Yes, I would agree with that. How many games are going to win this fall? After a 10-win debut at his alma mater, Jeff Brom is back for more in 2024, and Louisville has an over-under win total of 8.5 at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more. You got a trip to South Bend to play that Fighting Irish team that you beat in Cardinal Stadium last year, but then you've also got Austin Peay. You've also got Jacksonville State, and then the rivalry game at the end of the season against Kentucky. That's going to be in Lexington. Bud, do you have a Tyler Shuck health adjustment or health expectations adjustment that you can factor into your win total projections for the Louisville Cardinals?
Well, I do. Yeah. I think that is really important here because everywhere that he's been, they're like, oh, this guy is super, super talented. And then he has not stayed healthy, and he has been a lot of different places, obviously. So I think this team is materially better than it was last year. I just think it has a very challenging schedule. This is also not the price at which I would look to bet over. I think that 8-4 comes up very often in their projection. So I like Tyler Shuck. I think it's a very good defense. I love the corners. I think the receivers are probably better than they were last year, but there are some positions that they're also thin, and they're gonna have to stay healthy in addition to Shuck being healthy. So give me the under here ever so slightly. And I just think if you like this team a lot, there are better things to bet. Like bet them for the conference, right? Bet them for to make the playoff or things like that. If you really think this team is the goods.
I don't like this team a lot. I'm on the under. They brought in a lot of new faces because they had like last year. To me, Louisville was something of a perfect storm as far as a veteran roster and a nice schedule that kind of set the path for them to get to a lot of wins. I think you're replacing a lot of that. I think that the schedule is tougher. I think that relying on Tyler Shuck to stay healthy is not, if he does, I think they could be pretty good. But if he doesn't, and there's a decent chance that he won't, the bottom can fall out. I think defensively they're going to be fine. I love Gillott at defensive end. I think Miles Jernigan was a pretty nice get in the portal. I think in the second, what?
They got
Thor Griffith. Yeah. So it's like, I think the secondary is good. I think they also got some depth. Like, I think they did a decent job in the portal there, filling out the depth. My concern is on offense. I felt like they had to go to the portal for starters, and that's never really a great sign to me. So I look at all that. I look at the schedule. I think 8 wins is probably where we're going here. So if it's 8.5, give me the under.
Yeah. My dumb Chipalytics gave me 8.5. That's looking at,
they're on point.
Huh?
They're on point.
Well, especially because FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more. It's so fantastic. I love sports. I can just open up the app and jump right in. They also, some of the prices on this conference, as we're pulling them right now, are a little bit slanted one way or the other. So I hate that I'm just like following the price here, but when I'm right on the money with a let's see, what were my right on the money? I was right on the money with Georgia Tech, with Louisville, with Miami, with Stanford, and with Wake Forest. Just like spot on. But this one I will lean to the under. And to look at what happens if things don't go great is like, okay, so is it Pierce Clarkson or Harrison Bailey? Like let's look at that quarterback depth. Let's consider the load that not just Jawar Jordan, but that whole running back room carried last year. Some of the turnover that we've already mentioned in terms of the offense in general. And so I see a few things breaking the other way for the Cardinals this year. There are a lot of opportunities where you can chalk up the wins. This is not going to be a disappointing season, but at Notre Dame, at Clemson, you've got SMU and Miami at home, and we'll get to them on Wednesday, but I kind of think it sounds like I'm on the positive end of those teams. And then at the end of the season, Kentucky, that game being in Lexington, it's going to be a tough one. So I just see too many spots where an 8-4 season would not be a bad season. That's 18 wins in 2 years for Jeff Brom to get things started with the Cards. I'm right on the money at 8.5, but forced to go one way or the other. I'm going to go under.
And another reason to take the under, because you look at that at Boston College game as a game they should probably win. But don't overlook the fact that it's on a Friday night on the road without a week in between Miami and at Clemson. Those are always really tough to win.
We also don't really know how Jeff Brom coaches as a consistent favorite. Like at Purdue, it was basically giant killer, and last year, I mean, they were favored in quite a few games, but it was like a big favorite because their schedule was a freaking joke. Like this is a lot of expectations on them this year. And I don't know. We'll see. They could win the league. Like I think if they meet their potential, they're pretty much as good as anybody in this league.
Also, they are.
Hold on, I want to check something here. Let me do. Sorry, you talk. I got to count in my head.
Well, yeah, I was just going to mention that they got by the CW Death Star last year. Do y'all remember that? They went up to the big mustard bottle and Pitt beat them by 17. You're just picking your head up like, what in the world? Got off to an undefeated start, and then you lose to Pitt as a 7-point favorite by 17 points out of nowhere.
Also, only 6 home games here.
Yeah, like 5 of their last 6 games are on the road. That's what I was about to say. They play Miami at home on October 19th. Then they are on the road for Boston College, on the road for Clemson, on the road for Stanford. After that October 19th game against Miami, they don't have another home game until November 23rd against Pitt, and then they finish on the road at Kentucky. That's tough.
It's a tough schedule.
I think they're also they're going to have Notre Dame's attention, right? Because they beat them last year. Like that's probably not a game that the Irish will sleepwalk into, especially not with how easy Notre Dame's schedule is. Like they're probably
that's
doing
like their 4th toughest game of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
maybe 3rd. I mean, shoot.
But again, Louisville to me is definitively in that sort of upper crust of the ACC. It's just a tough schedule and a big number, slightly to the under. Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. ACC win totals continues, and we'll get things started with the M. More specifically, the U. Miami will kickstart us as we continue with our ACC win totals. North Carolina, NC State, Pitt, SMU, Stanford, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. It'll be a loaded show. Come and join us live. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you.